Yep.
then I don't think anybody put Spotlight on their top 10
That's
based
true.
on last year.
Yeah.
The Big Short, people put on their top 10. We started seeing some of that. So
Room.
Yeah, we saw Room on people's top 10. So we started seeing some of those movies that didn't win were on people's top 10, where the one that won was not. So I guess the thing that I keep coming back to that makes me kind of go, okay, well, this is just the way it is if you think about if this theory that I have that the Oscars are prophetic in some way, that they are leading the culture and that they have to be prophetic, then you're always going to have the same thing that's been going on for history with art, is that true art will not be commercially successful, that it'll always be saying something that's a little bit ahead of its time, and that it will be done for art and art's sake, So I think that's going to be true of the Oscars always, with relationship to, I think we all want the popular film to win just to go, okay.
Like the Forrest Gump, where you're like,
yeah, well, Forrest Gump won.
Yeah, I know. And that's what I'm saying, where everyone was like, both are happy.
Yeah, so we all kind of want that. Yet I think we should not really want that, because if we truly want art to shape where we're heading, to shape culture in a positive way, we have to have that room for experimenting. We have to have the room to make movies like Moonlight, that was only made for a few $1 million and that ends up being an Oscar winner. And in that way, just like the prophets in the Old Testament, if you remember them at all, they were living outside of the town, and they were very isolated and very much didn't belong in either community. They didn't belong in, their own Jewish community, and they didn't belong in the mainstream community of that day. So being a prophet of sorts, being a Moonlight kind of movie, is going to be that, of being a little bit more isolated, a little less popular, and a little bit more on the edge as far as the way people view you. And I think that's what I hope the Oscars will always be to us, even though more and more people might go, well, I don't care about the ceremony because it's just a bunch of stars patting each other on the back, or I don't care about these movies because I haven't seen them. I think that's sad. I think more people need to see them because of what we've experienced, even this podcast, of seeing how really, really relevant these messages are when you curate them together and see what they all say. But I also think that people should appreciate, sort of like what Viola Davis said, although I think she went a little bit too far in saying that it was the only way people saw life.
A really good way,
It is a really good way for people to see life. And so that's what it gives to us each year, and I love it. I love this, what we're doing here with this podcast. You and I work in a space where we look at people's top 10 movies all the time and see just this amazing insights, these treasures come bouncing out of these top 10 and knock people over the head and go, oh my gosh, this is affirming our story, and it's affirming who we are, and leading us to live a much more full life because we understand things now through our movies and we have a visual. I think if we took that on a national perspective and we all embraced that, like how cool would that be if we had our whole nation kind of embracing, wow, look at this. This is what this might be telling us as far as where we're headed.
Yeah, and you can, also too, as a Christian, you can get ahead of understanding where the culture is going.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's the other piece. It's not, again, you don't have to agree with everything.
Right.
But the issue is to be aware, because if Paul talks about be all things to all men, you have to also know the people around you and where we're going as a culture to even understand how to love within that culture. How do we, bridge those gaps? How do we extend kindness? How do we fight division? We have to know. And so hiding and not really being aware of what's going on is not good either. So I think it's really good to sort of have this, hey, this is some things to look out for. This is what is going on. This is the pain. This is what's going on currently. This is how things are playing out. To be aware, to really know, like, God, where are you taking us with this? How are we to be in the midst of culture?
And I wouldn't personally advocate for people running out and just seeing Moonlight,
Sure.
Because I think that people who are just going to go see Moonlight, based on this podcast, going, oh, well, I'll go out and see what God has to say through Moonlight. I think they're missing what we see with people's top 10 movies. We don't ask people for their favorite movie.
Exactly.
We ask people for their top 10 movies because it gives us a picture that's curated about what moves them. And so that movie that may be their favorite movie is mixed in with these other movies, and we start to see patterns and we start to see themes. And so I think the same thing is true. I would recommend people go see, if they're going to see Moonlight, go see Lion also.
Oh, Lion was
and
wonderful, too.
Just for the sake of comparing them, they're so, to me, they're so side by side. And then compare that to La La Land and look at it and say why, and how are these different and how are these the same? And then go to Arrival and watch that, and then look at Time and look at going to the past and all the themes that we've brought up. Just kind of dive into the movies as a whole, not as Moonlight being just your favorite movie or the favorite movie of the Oscars.
And that's the beauty about what we do at Real too, is that we don't make people, just because one movie is someone's favorite doesn't mean that that's the best movie of all time. We really love the individuality of how you see it. Like I said, you and I can really look at Moonlight and see things that we loved, and then
totally
things that I'm
things.
like, I will go to battle with you, Bryan Coley,
Yeah, we were before this podcast, just so you know, Kim was battling because she did not feel like the friend was. I
struggled with him being a picture of love because of the abusiveness and because of the unsaid apologies and things like that. But then there are things that I could appreciate. And I was telling Bryan earlier, I feel like when someone comes into our office and says, I love this movie, and maybe I've seen it and I'm secretly going, I hate that movie, and that movie means nothing.
Right.
One of the best things I've learned to do is to say, why do you love it? Yeah. Tell me what you saw. What did it mean to you? And it's been amazing because even movies that I totally dislike.
Yeah, suddenly find yourself liking it.
Right. It's not that I have to.
Exactly.
It's not that I have to agree with every behavior or every scene. It's not that. But I can watch it in terms of, that really moved your heart, and that tells me about you. Exactly. And it's a way to honor someone.
It
and
is.
I've really learned
totally dignity giving. And the last thing I'll say for especially, I'm just going to speak to Christians on this one, is that you may go, I ain't going to go see no movie about no gay African American coming of age or something like that. I'm not going to go spend money on that or something like that. I can understand that might be hard to walk into and maybe not the thing you want to do on a Friday night, kind of thing. But I would say that if you look at Jesus' storytelling, he used stories that were very arresting to people. He used stories that actually caused people to go, okay, you just used a Samaritan as the hero of a story in which the Samaritan's the one coming along and taking care of the person on the side of the road while the religious people walk right by. That's the story that Jesus told, right? Yeah. In fact, there's a friend of mine, Matt Renge, who studied the parables and was doing his master's on it, who said, that Jesus' storytelling is what got him killed. If we think of how
he incited people,
right? Like if all of a sudden you're in that crowd and you're seeing, you're not going to make the hero of the story a Samaritan. Samaritans are, this and this and this and this, and they're the furthest thing from my experience. Well, I feel like that's probably the way you would feel about Moonlight. That it's the furthest thing from your experience. I'm not African American. I'm not gay. And yet Jesus allowed himself to tell a story in which the question he was answering was, how do I get into heaven? And he said, love God and love your neighbor. And then the guy said, who's my neighbor? And then he told the story of the Samaritan. And the Samaritan in history perspective was despised. They were half-bloods, if I use the Harry Potter language. So I think Jesus was in the business of telling stories where he used people who, as heroes, to tell his truths, that we would go, no, you can't use that person to tell the truth of God. So I would just challenge us as we look at Moonlight and go, you're not going to use a gay African-American story to tell me truths that God's trying to say. Like, Bryan, you're way off the deep end on this to think that a movie like that is God speaking through. And I would just point you to the Samaritan story and say, well, he does that, and he does things like eat my flesh and drink my blood, which is cannibalism, as a means of separating people and going, are you with me or are you not with me?
Or qualifying, one thing is more sinful than the other and feeling really comfortable in your own skin and being prideful. Like for me, you step back and go, well, what makes you angry about a film and what works you up, and really getting the heart of it. And sometimes I see my own hypocrisy. I see my own vulnerability, my own flawedness, things that I know that I haven't apologized for, or I haven't worked through, those kind of things in my own life. And God has used that to reflect my own heart.
And we know that whenever, based on doing Real, that we know when you get angry about a movie, that actually that's God speaking to you too.
What are you angry about,
He's
Kim?
moving you with anger, just like he moves you with tears. And it's just as important for us to look at that anger and go, what is it that I desire? That's being victimized, or that's not being met. And we found that actually, movies that make you angry speak to your core desire. And so actually that was what we were talking about before this podcast, is I was going, if this movie makes you angry, what piece of it made you angry? Okay, now let's talk about what you really want for that human being, and maybe that's what you want not only for that human being but for yourself,
and maybe something that I need to step in for other people that maybe I haven't had the courage to do, that I need to be the person that steps up and is that person to someone else.
Well,
never enough time.
We've
never
definitely
enough
gone
time.
long on this one. If there's anybody still listening, thanks for joining us in this Oscar wrap-up.
Great.
And
thanks for having me. This was really fun. I don't usually get to do this with you, so this was
job.
Fun. This is a lot of fun to talk movies and disagree and agree and still shake hands at the end of the day and be friends. We're a we. We're a we. So
now I just got to figure out your past.
Yeah, exactly. You can ask me questions. I won't be afraid of them. But thank you so much for joining us again for Real Conversations, and we hope you tune in again and listen and learn more about interesting movies and people and how they view them, because there's more to come.
Thanks for joining us for Real Conversations. If you happen to be in the Atlanta area and would like to explore what your top 10 movies say about you, you can get real by going to realexperiences.com and book an experience. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Real by Art Within.